Let me start by reminding you of a truth so profound and so powerful that it can reshape the way you see your life. God is with you always. Not just sometimes, not just in the good moments, but always. Through every triumph and every trial, through every joy and every tear, the presence of Almighty God surrounds you. From the beginning of time, God has declared his intention to walk with his people. He said to Joshua, I will never leave you nor forsake you, Joshua 1:5. And Jesus reaffirmed this promise when he said, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age, Matthew 28:20. These words are not empty. They are the foundation upon which we can stand no matter what life throws at us. But what does it mean that God is always with us? It means that no matter where you go, he is there. Whether you're on the mountaintop celebrating victory or in the valley wrestling with defeat, his presence is unwavering. It means that when the world feels heavy and your spirit feels weary, you can lean on a strength that is not your own. Think about it. The creator of the universe, the one who spoke galaxies into existence, is not distant or detached. He is close, closer than the very air you breathe. He is not just the God of heaven. He is the God of here, the God of now, the God who walks beside you every step of the way. Yet, how often do we forget this truth? When challenges arise, when the storms of life rage, we feel abandoned, isolated, as though we're fighting our battles alone. But let me tell you something, just because you can't see him doesn't mean he's not there. Just because you don't feel his presence doesn't mean he's absent. God's presence is not based on our feelings, it's based on his faithfulness. In the moments when life feels overwhelming, when fear tries to creep in, remember this, you are never outnumbered. Why? Because the God who is with you is greater than anything against you. Isaiah 43:2 says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. Notice, it doesn't say if you pass through the waters. It says when. God never promised we wouldn't face hardships, but he did promise us you will not face them alone. And his presence isn't just for the difficult times. No, God is with you in the ordinary moments too. When you wake up in the morning, he is there. When you're at work, running errands, or spending time with loved ones, his presence surrounds you. The problem is not that God is absent, it's that we often fail to acknowledge him. Imagine how different your life would feel if you lived every moment aware of his nearness. But here's the key: experiencing God's presence requires faith. Faith that says, even when I can't see it, I know you're working. Faith that believes his promise over your circumstances. And as you lean into that faith, you'll begin to see his fingerprints in every detail of your life. His presence is transformative. When you know that God is with you, fear loses its power. When you know that God is with you, hope becomes unshakable. When you know that God is with you, even the most daunting challenges become opportunities for his glory to shine. So let me ask you, what would you do differently if you truly believed with every fiber of your being that God is with you right now? Would you face your fears with more courage? Would you step into your purpose with greater confidence? Would you let go of the doubts and insecurities that have been holding you back? God's presence is not a concept or a theory, it's a reality. And it's a reality that changes everything. The unchanging promise of God's presence. From the dawn of creation to the final words of Scripture, one truth echoes with unwavering clarity: God has promised to never leave nor forsake his people. This assurance is not merely a comforting sentiment, it is a divine covenant, a foundational truth that undergirds the faith of every believer. In Deuteronomy 31:6, Moses speaks to the Israelites as they prepare to enter the promised land: be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. These words were spoken to a nation standing on the brink of uncertainty and fear, and yet they serve as a timeless reminder for us all. This promise was not just for the Israelites. It is a thread that runs throughout the Bible, reaffirmed in moments of triumph and trial. When Joshua stepped into the daunting role of leading God's people, God himself declared, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you, Joshua 1:5. When King David faced overwhelming enemies and personal failure, he too found solace in the steadfast presence of God, writing, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, Psalm 23:4. What makes this promise so profound is its unchanging nature. People may fail you. Circumstances may shift. Life may bring storms that threaten to shake the very ground beneath your feet. But God's promise stands firm. His presence is not conditional on your behavior, your feelings, or the challenges you face. It is rooted in his unchanging character, a God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, Hebrews 13:8. Consider this: when Jesus walked this earth, he embodied God's promise of presence. Emmanuel, which means God with us, was not just his name, it was his mission. And even before he ascended to heaven, he left us with these words of assurance, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age, Matthew 28:20. God's promise is not a fleeting gesture, it is eternal. It is as unshakable as his throne in heaven. When life feels overwhelming, when doubt whispers that you are alone, you can rest in the knowledge that the God who spoke galaxies into existence is by your side. His presence is not dependent on your perfection or your strength. It is anchored in his love and commitment to you as his beloved child. This unchanging promise means that no matter where you are in life, God is with you. Whether you are walking through the valley of despair or standing on the mountaintop of victory, his presence remains constant. It is not limited to church pews or moments of prayer. It goes with you into your workplace, your relationships, your struggles, and your dreams. And let's not forget, this promise is not passive. God's presence is active, powerful, and transformative. It brings peace in the midst of chaos, strength in the face of adversity, and hope when all seems lost. It is the anchor that holds us steady in life's storms and the light that guides us through the darkness. So when you feel abandoned or forgotten, remind yourself of this unshakable truth: God has promised to never leave you nor forsake you. His word is eternal, his love is relentless, and his presence is your constant companion. This is the God we serve, a God whose promise of presence is as sure as the rising sun and as eternal as the heavens. God's presence brings strength and comfort. There is a unique and indescribable power in knowing that God is with you, a power that fills the heart with courage, soothes the soul with peace, and equips the spirit with resilience to face life's challenges. Recognizing God's presence transforms the way we experience adversity, enabling us to walk with confidence even in the midst of uncertainty and struggle. In Isaiah 41:10, God speaks directly to the fears and insecurities of his people. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Notice how the assurance of his presence is tied to the promise of strength. God doesn't simply stand by as a passive observer. His presence actively strengthens and sustains us. Think about the story of Gideon in Judges 6. When God called Gideon to deliver Israel from the oppressive Midianites, Gideon's initial reaction was one of doubt and insecurity. He saw himself as weak and unqualified. But God's words changed everything. The Lord is with you. Mighty warrior, Judges 6:12. It wasn't Gideon's strength that mattered. It was the fact that God was with him. That knowledge gave Gideon the courage to rise above his fears and step into his divine assignment. God's presence doesn't eliminate life's challenges, but it gives us the strength to face them with confidence. Imagine walking into a difficult situation, knowing without a shadow of a doubt that the creator of the universe is standing beside you. That awareness shifts your perspective. What once seemed impossible becomes achievable. What once caused fear now inspires faith. His presence doesn't just bring strength, it brings comfort. In the moments when life feels overwhelming, when burdens weigh heavy on your heart, God's presence is the refuge where you can find peace. Psalm 46:1 reminds us God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Notice the word ever present. God's comfort is not something you have to search for. It is always available, always near. Consider the Apostle Paul, who faced immense persecution, imprisonment, and hardship for the sake of the gospel. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, God reassures him, saying, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul's response reveals the depth of his understanding of God's presence. "Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." Paul found strength not in his own ability, but in the abiding presence of God, which turned his struggles into opportunities for divine strength to be revealed. God's presence also brings a supernatural peace that defies understanding. Philippians 4:7 describes it as the peace of God, which transcends all understanding and which will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This peace is not the absence of trouble, but the assurance of God's control in the midst of it. It is the steady calm that allows you to rest even when the world around you is in turmoil. This peace and strength are not just for the extraordinary moments of life, they are for the everyday challenges as well. Whether it's a difficult conversation, a demanding job, or a personal struggle, God's presence empowers you to move forward with courage and composure. But here's the key: recognizing God's presence requires intentional focus. In the noise and busyness of life, it's easy to forget that He is with us. Yet when we pause to acknowledge His nearness, we tap into a source of strength and comfort that far surpasses human understanding. It is in those moments of stillness, when we turn our hearts toward Him, that His presence becomes most tangible. God's strength and comfort are not reserved for the strong or the perfect. They are for the broken, the weary, and the overwhelmed. They are for you. No matter where you are or what you're facing, His presence is your lifeline, your fortress, and your ever-present help. So when the storms of life rage around you, when your own strength feels inadequate, and when fear tries to take hold of your heart, remember this: God's presence is with you, bringing courage to your spirit, peace to your soul, and resilience to your journey. His strength is made perfect in your weakness, and His comfort is a gift that never runs dry. Loneliness is no match for His presence. Loneliness can be one of the most painful experiences a person can endure. It whispers lies of insignificance, of being unseen and forgotten, of walking through life unnoticed and unsupported. But the truth is, loneliness is no match for the abiding presence of God. His presence fills the void of isolation and reminds us that we are never truly alone, even in our darkest moments. From the very beginning, God created us for connection, not only with one another, but most importantly with Him. He saw Adam in the Garden of Eden and declared, "It is not good for the man to be alone," Genesis 2:18. This speaks not only to our human relationships, but also to the divine relationship God longs to have with each of us. His desire to be with us is woven into the fabric of creation itself. Loneliness often strikes hardest in times of transition, loss, or change. Perhaps it's the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or the feeling of being misunderstood by those around you. But even in the depths of such moments, God's presence remains constant. In Psalm 34:18, we are reminded the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. God's proximity is most evident when we feel the most alone. The story of Elijah offers a powerful example of how God meets us in our loneliness. After a triumphant moment on Mount Carmel, where God displayed His power through fire from heaven, Elijah fled into the wilderness, overcome by fear and despair. He isolated himself, convinced that he was utterly alone in his faith and his fight. Yet in that wilderness, God came to him not with fire or wind or earthquake, but with a gentle whisper, 1 Kings 19:12. That whisper was God's way of saying, "Elijah, I am here. You are not alone." God's presence doesn't just alleviate loneliness, it transforms it. When you recognize that the Creator of the universe is with you, walking beside you, and dwelling within you, loneliness loses its power. David understood this deeply when he wrote, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there." Psalm 139:7-8. No matter where you are physically, emotionally, or spiritually, God's presence surrounds you. Even Jesus, during His time on earth, experienced moments of solitude and rejection. In the Garden of Gethsemane, as he prayed and faced the agony of the cross, his closest friends could not stay awake with him. On the cross, he bore the weight of separation and isolation so that we would never have to face it alone. Through his sacrifice, we are given the gift of God's abiding presence, the Holy Spirit living within us, a constant companion and guide. This truth is especially powerful in today's world, where loneliness has become a silent epidemic. In a society that is more connected digitally than ever before, people still find themselves yearning for meaningful connection. But human relationships, as important as they are, can never fully satisfy the longing of the soul. That space can only be filled by the presence of God. When you embrace the reality of his presence, loneliness begins to lose its sting. It doesn't mean you won't experience moments of solitude, but solitude with God is not the same as loneliness. Solitude becomes an opportunity for communion with him, a sacred space where you can hear his voice and feel his love in a way that nothing else can offer. Think of the Apostle Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament from prison cells. In the isolation of confinement, Paul declared with unshakable confidence, "The Lord stood at my side and gave me strength," 2 Timothy 4:17. His circumstances were harsh, but his spirit was filled with the assurance of God's presence. This same assurance is available to you today. When you feel abandoned, when the weight of loneliness presses down on your heart, remember that God's presence is closer than you can imagine. He is the friend who sticks closer than a brother, Proverbs 18:24, the comforter who never leaves your side. You are not walking through life unnoticed. You are seen, you are known, and you are deeply loved by the one who promises to never leave you nor forsake you. Loneliness may be a reality of the human experience, but it does not have the final word. God's presence fills the void that no earthly relationship can fill. He is the companion who walks with you in every season, the voice that speaks hope into your despair, and the light that shines in the darkest corners of your heart. His presence transforms loneliness into an opportunity to draw closer to him, to know his heart, and to experience his unfailing love. His presence in the storms of life. Life is unpredictable. One moment, everything seems calm and secure, and the next a storm appears, threatening to undo everything we hold dear. Storms can take many forms: loss, illness, betrayal, financial hardship, or even an inner battle of fear and doubt. In these moments of chaos and uncertainty, it's easy to feel abandoned and overwhelmed. But the truth is, God walks with us through every storm, offering his peace, guidance, and unwavering presence. In the Gospels, we find one of the most powerful illustrations of God's presence in the storms of life. In Mark 4:35-41, Jesus and his disciples were crossing the Sea of Galilee when a violent storm arose. The waves were crashing, and the disciples, seasoned fishermen, were terrified. Meanwhile, Jesus was asleep in the boat. Panicked, they woke him, saying, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus rose, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Instantly, the storm ceased, and a great calm settled over the waters. This story reminds us that no storm is beyond God's control. But even more importantly, it shows us that his presence is not dependent on the storm's intensity or duration. Jesus was with them in the boat the entire time. He didn't leave them to face the storm alone, and he won't leave you either. His presence is the anchor that holds steady, even when the waves rage and the winds howl. Consider another story: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were thrown into a blazing furnace for refusing to worship a false god, Daniel 3:16-28. In the midst of the fire, God's presence was revealed. A fourth figure, described as like a son of the gods, walked with them in the flames. The fire did not harm them, nor was the smell of smoke on their clothes. God didn't remove them from the furnace. Instead, he joined them in it. His presence transformed the fire from a place of destruction into a place of divine encounter. storms and trials have a way of revealing what we truly depend on. When the winds blow and the foundations of our lives are shaken, we are reminded that human strength, resources, and understanding are not enough. It is in these moments that God's presence becomes our refuge and strength. Psalm 46:1 proclaims, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Notice the word ever-present. His presence is not occasional or conditional. It is constant, unwavering, and available at all times. The storms of life often bring chaos, but God's presence brings peace. This peace is not the absence of trouble, but the assurance of his control in the midst of it. Philippians 4:7 describes it as the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. It's the kind of peace that allows you to stand firm even when everything around you is falling apart. It's the calm assurance that the one who calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee can calm the storm in your heart. God's presence also provides guidance when life feels uncertain. In Isaiah 30:21, he promises, whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. In the chaos of a storm, when you can't see the way forward, his voice becomes your compass, leading you with wisdom and clarity. One of the most profound aspects of God's presence in the storms of life is the way it shapes us. Storms have the potential to refine our faith, deepen our trust, and strengthen our relationship with him. James 1:2-4 encourages us to consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. In the storm, God is not just present, he is working, molding, and preparing you for greater things. The Apostle Paul understood this deeply. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, after pleading with God to remove a thorn in his flesh, Paul received this response, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul's perspective shifted. Instead of focusing on the storm, he embraced God's presence and power in the midst of it. No storm is too great for God. Whether the storm ends with miraculous deliverance or with the strength to endure, his presence is your assurance that you are never alone. He is the still, small voice in the chaos, the light in the darkness, and the firm foundation beneath your feet. So when the winds of life threaten to knock you down, when the waves rise higher than you ever imagined, and when fear whispers that you won't make it, remember this: God is with you. His presence goes before you, walks beside you, and surrounds you on every side. The storm may rage, but his peace will calm your heart, and his guidance will lead you safely through. God is with you in the ordinary and extraordinary. We often look for God in the extraordinary, the miraculous moments, the life-changing events, and the mountaintop experiences where his presence feels undeniable. But the beauty of God's nature is that he is not just the God of the grand and miraculous. He is also the God of the small, the simple, and the everyday. His presence is not reserved for moments of crisis or spiritual highs. It is with us in every part of daily life, both the ordinary and the extraordinary. In the book of Genesis, we read about Jacob's encounter with God at Bethel. As Jacob slept, he dreamed of a ladder reaching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending. When he awoke, he exclaimed, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. Genesis 28:16. Jacob's revelation reminds us that God's presence can be found even in places and moments we least expect. It is not always heralded by thunder and fire. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, and constant. Consider the story of Ruth. Her life wasn't filled with miracles or dramatic signs from heaven. Yet, in the midst of her ordinary circumstances, gleaning in fields to provide for herself and her mother-in-law, God was present. He guided her steps, aligned her path with Boaz, and wove her into the lineage of Jesus Christ. This story is a powerful reminder that God's presence is active in the seemingly mundane aspects of life, working all things together for his purpose. God's presence in the ordinary moments of life is deeply personal. It is in the quiet of the morning when you wake and take your first breath. It is in the commute to work, the conversations with loved ones, and the routine tasks that fill your day. When we acknowledge his presence in these moments, the ordinary becomes sacred. Washing dishes, Walking the dog or preparing a meal can become acts of worship when done with the awareness of His presence. But here's the incredible truth: God's presence is just as faithful in the ordinary as it is in the extraordinary. It doesn't wax and wane based on the magnitude of the moment. Psalm 139:3 tells us, "You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways." God is intimately aware of every detail of your life, from the most mundane to the most monumental. When we recognize His presence in the ordinary, our perspective shifts. We begin to see our daily routines not as insignificant, but as opportunities for connection with Him. A morning walk becomes a time of communion where the beauty of creation reflects His glory. A quiet evening at home becomes a space for reflection and gratitude. Even the challenges of the day become chances to lean on His strength and wisdom. The Apostle Paul captures this truth beautifully in Colossians 3:17, "And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him." When we live with the awareness that God is with us in all things, our lives become a continuous act of worship, and the ordinary becomes extraordinary. God's presence is also a source of strength and encouragement in the unnoticed parts of life. When you feel overlooked, when your efforts seem unappreciated, or when the tasks of daily life feel mundane, remember this: God sees you. His presence affirms your worth and sanctifies your work, no matter how small it may seem. The truth is, God is not waiting for you to reach a milestone or achieve greatness to walk with you. He is with you in the process, in the preparation, in the learning, and in the moments of stillness. His presence is constant, unchanging, and faithful, transforming both the ordinary and extraordinary into opportunities to experience His love and purpose. So whether you're climbing mountains or folding laundry, achieving milestones or navigating setbacks, celebrating victories or enduring challenges, remember that God is with you. His presence is not confined to certain moments or achievements. It is woven into the fabric of your life, from the everyday routines to the miraculous breakthroughs, reminding you that every moment matters when it's lived with Him. Faith unlocks the awareness of His presence. God's presence is a constant reality. Whether you are on the mountaintop of joy or in the valley of despair, He is there. Yet, how often do we move through life unaware of His nearness, missing the profound comfort and guidance He offers? The truth is, while God is always with us, it takes faith and spiritual sensitivity to recognize and fully experience His presence. Faith becomes the key that unlocks our awareness of Him, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary and the unseen into the undeniable. Hebrews 11:6 tells us, "And without faith it is impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him." Faith begins with believing that God is real, that He is who He says He is, and that He is always with us. This belief is not rooted in what we can see or feel, but in the truth of His word. Faith requires us to trust in His promises, even when our circumstances seem to contradict them. Consider the story of Elisha and his servant in 2 Kings 6. Surrounded by an enemy army, the servant was terrified and saw no way out. But Elisha, with spiritual eyes of faith, saw a greater reality. He prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." In that moment, the servant's eyes were opened, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire, God's army, protecting them. This story reminds us that faith allows us to perceive what is spiritually true, even when it is invisible to the natural eye. Faith is not a passive belief, but an active posture of seeking and trusting. When we cultivate faith, we begin to notice the ways God is moving in our lives. We see His hand in the beauty of creation, in the kindness of others, in the timing of events, and in the still small voice that speaks to our hearts. Faith tunes our spiritual senses, helping us recognize His presence in ways we might otherwise overlook. One of the greatest barriers to experiencing God's presence is doubt. Doubt whispers that God is distant or disinterested, that our struggles are too small or too messy for Him to care. But faith silences these lies. It declares, God is here, and he is for me even when feelings of doubt arise. Faith chooses to trust in the truth of his word. As James 1:6-8 warns, doubt makes us like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Faith, on the other hand, anchors us in the assurance of his nearness. Faith also requires intentionality. It calls us to make space for God in our busy lives and to seek him with a sincere heart. Jeremiah 29:13 promises, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. When we prioritize time in prayer, meditation on his word, and worship, we create opportunities to experience his presence more deeply. These practices are not about earning his presence. He is already with us, but about attuning our hearts to recognize and engage with him. Spiritual sensitivity grows as we exercise our faith. Just as physical senses can be trained to notice subtle details, our spiritual senses become sharper when we regularly seek God and trust in his promises. Over time, we learn to discern his voice amidst the noise of the world, to feel his peace in the midst of chaos, and to see his hand guiding us through life's twists and turns. The life of Jesus is the ultimate example of faith unlocking the awareness of God's presence. In every moment, Jesus lived with an unbroken awareness of his Father's nearness. He often withdrew to pray, demonstrating the importance of communion with God. He trusted in the Father's plan, even when it led to the cross. His faith was unwavering, and through it, he showed us how to walk in constant awareness of God's presence. In our own lives, this kind of faith is cultivated through practice. It begins with small steps, pausing to thank God for his goodness, choosing to trust him in uncertain moments, and seeking his guidance in daily decisions. As we do, our awareness of his presence grows. What once felt distant becomes intimate, and what once seemed invisible becomes undeniable. Faith doesn't eliminate life's challenges, but it changes how we face them. When we walk by faith, we no longer see ourselves as alone or abandoned. Instead, we become deeply aware of Emmanuel, God with us. This awareness brings peace in uncertainty, strength in weakness, and hope in despair. The Apostle Paul's life is a testament to this truth. Shipwrecked, imprisoned, and persecuted, Paul's faith kept him deeply aware of God's presence. He declared with confidence, "The Lord stood at my side and gave me strength," 2 Timothy 4:17. Paul's faith allowed him to experience God's nearness, even in the harshest circumstances, and to live with unwavering assurance of his presence. Ultimately, faith opens our eyes to the reality that God is not just a distant creator, but an ever-present Father. He is with us in our laughter and our tears, in our victories and our struggles, in the moments of clarity and the seasons of uncertainty. Faith teaches us to trust that he is near, even when we cannot see or feel him, and to live in the joy and freedom of his abiding presence. Transformation through God's presence. Living with the constant awareness of God's presence is not merely a comforting thought, it is a life-changing reality. When we truly grasp that God is always with us, walking beside us, guiding our steps, and surrounding us with his love, our lives are transformed in profound and lasting ways. This awareness does more than shift our perspective. It renews our hope, ignites our purpose, and fills our hearts with a joy that surpasses understanding. Transformation begins with hope. In a world filled with uncertainty, challenges, and pain, the presence of God provides a steady foundation. Psalm 46:1 reminds us, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Knowing that God is near gives us the courage to face life's storms. We may not have all the answers, but we can rest in the assurance that we are never alone. This hope anchors us, enabling us to endure hardships with faith and confidence, trusting that God is working all things together for our good. But the transformation doesn't stop at hope. The awareness of God's presence also infuses our lives with purpose. When we understand that God is with us, we begin to see our lives as part of a greater narrative, his story. Every decision, every action, and every relationship becomes an opportunity to reflect his glory and advance his kingdom. The mundane tasks of daily life are no longer insignificant. They are infused with meaning. Whether you are raising a family, pursuing a career, or serving in ministry, God's presence reminds you that your work matters and that He is partnering with you in His divine plan. The Apostle Paul captures this truth in Philippians 2:13, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose. When we live with the awareness of His presence, we become co-laborers with Him, empowered to fulfill the unique calling He has placed on our lives. This sense of purpose propels us forward even when the path is unclear, because we trust that He is leading us every step of the way. Another powerful transformation that comes from God's presence is the gift of joy. This joy is not dependent on circumstances. It is rooted in the unchanging character of God and the intimacy of our relationship with Him. Psalm 16:11 declares, "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." This joy fills the void that material possessions, achievements, or human relationships cannot. It is a joy that radiates from within, spilling over into every area of our lives and touching those around us. When we live with an awareness of God's presence, we are also transformed in how we handle challenges and adversity. Fear, anxiety, and discouragement lose their grip on our hearts when we know that the Creator of the universe is walking with us. Isaiah 41:10 offers this assurance, "So do not fear. For I am with you, do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." God's presence doesn't necessarily remove the difficulties we face, but it gives us the strength to endure them and the peace to navigate them with grace. This transformation is also evident in our relationships. As we become more aware of God's presence, His love fills our hearts, enabling us to love others more deeply and selflessly. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control becomes increasingly evident in our lives as we stay connected to Him. This change not only blesses us, but also impacts everyone we encounter, drawing them closer to God through our example. Living with the awareness of God's presence also transforms how we view ourselves. In a world that often leaves us feeling inadequate, unworthy, or insignificant, His presence speaks a different truth. It reminds us that we are deeply loved, wonderfully made, and uniquely chosen for a purpose. This understanding brings freedom from the need to prove ourselves or seek validation from others. Instead, we rest in the knowledge that we are fully known and fully loved by our Creator. The awareness of God's presence even transforms our perspective on time. We begin to see each day as a gift and each moment as an opportunity to experience His love and share it with others. This awareness helps us live with intentionality, prioritizing what truly matters and letting go of distractions that pull us away from His purpose. Finally, transformation through God's presence leads to a life of worship. Worship is not limited to songs sung on Sunday mornings. It becomes a lifestyle. Every action, every word, and every thought becomes an offering to God, reflecting our gratitude for His nearness. This kind of worship brings us into deeper communion with Him, allowing His presence to shape us more fully into His image. When we live with a constant awareness of God's presence, our lives are radically changed. Hope replaces despair. Purpose replaces aimlessness. Joy replaces sorrow. Fear gives way to faith. And self-doubt is replaced with confidence in His love. This transformation is not a one-time event, but an ongoing journey as His presence continues to mold us into the people He created us to be. Living in the awareness of God's presence is not about striving or achieving, it's about abiding. It's about opening our hearts to the reality that He is with us always and allowing that truth to transform every aspect of our lives. Conclusion: embrace God's presence. Embrace your purpose. As we come to the close of this message, I want to remind you of the incredible truth that God is always with you. From the moment you wake up to the last thought you have before you sleep, His presence surrounds you. This is not just a comforting thought, it is a powerful reality that has the ability to change everything about your life. We've explored how God's unchanging promise of His presence offers us unshakable hope, even in the darkest of times. We've seen how His presence brings strength and peace, how it fills the void of loneliness, and how it guides us through life's storms. His presence is not limited to moments of crisis or joy. It permeates every part of our daily existence, ordinary and extraordinary alike. And it's through faith that we unlock the awareness of this constant presence, allowing us to truly experience the transformative power of His love and grace. The awareness of God's presence brings purpose to every step we take, and it brings joy that can never be taken away. It enables us to face challenges with resilience, to love others selflessly, and to walk confidently in the purpose He has designed for us. And the most beautiful part is that when we live with an active awareness of His presence, our lives are continually transformed. Hope rises where there was despair. Purpose flourishes where there was aimlessness. And joy abides where sorrow once dwelled. Now, I encourage you to embrace the truth that you are never alone. Know that God's presence is with you in every moment. Trust in His plan for your life, no matter how uncertain the road may seem. You are a vessel of His purpose, and with Him by your side, there is nothing you cannot overcome. Step into each day with the confidence that His presence is your constant companion, and allow it to guide, transform, and empower you to live the life you were created for. Live with the awareness of God's presence, for in that awareness you will find everything you need: peace, strength, purpose, and joy. And remember, where God is, transformation is inevitable.